starting off this countdown, we have the Moth Man. The legend of the Moth Man is a really freaking eerie one. So the Moth Man originates from West Virginia folklore. Apparently it's a large 10-foot tall gray creature with red glowing eyes and wings, and has the ability to fly over 100 miles per hour, so he's pretty damn fast. This creature has been spotted on a number of occasions. In particular, it's believed that once you see him, bad things are going to happen, so he's kinda like an omen. The first report of this creature was on November 15th, 1966. On this night, two sets of young couples drove out to Lover's Lane to get frisky in their cars. It was Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Mallet. That's when one of the couples noticed a massive creature with red glowing eyes watching them from afar. The couple, Roger and Linda, freaked out and sped on out of there, but the Mothman followed their car and tried to attack them. Thankfully, they made it out alright, but they were hella spooked and reported their encounter to the police. During the next couple of days, a number of different people reported similar encounters to the police as well. Like two volunteer firemen claimed they saw a large bird with red eyes. Then a contractor named Newell Partridge was out in a field at night when he saw the creature in the distance. He shined his light in his eyes and he said they glowed like bicycle reflectors. He then went on to blame this creature for the disappearance of his German Shepherd. So people all around town were hella freaked out. The scariest sighting would have to be in 1967, around the time the Silver Bridge collapsed. Apparently, people who saw the Mothman then went on to receive premonitions of the bridge collapsing and experienced terrible nightmares. And on the day that the bridge actually did collapse, a number of witnesses claimed that they saw the Mothman perched nearby just watching. That's creepy. As long as he doesn't come to Canada though, I'm good. In our fourth spot today, we have the red-eyed roadside cryptid. This is the name given to a creature that a man named Britton saw one early morning in Texas. So it was June 20th, 2000 at around 1 a.m. He had just gotten off work and was headed home. Now on the route that he takes, he explained that there's this 90-degree turn and you have to go really slow and be careful because sometimes they find cattle out on the road. So he was making his turn when all of a sudden he saw it. And he knew right away it was not an animal of any sorts. This creature had red eyes and was on 2 feet and had black hair all over its body. So Britton, being the curious man that he was, got out of his truck and shined a flashlight at this creature. That's when the creature raised its arm above its head and let out an ear-piercing scream. It then turned around and ran behind a house. So the man immediately got back in his truck and drove away in disbelief of what he just saw. But according to him, he has heard the scream at night before, but he never knew where it was coming from or who or what was making this noise. After doing research, he found out that this creature he saw is related to the Bigfoot. Sounds like it's Bigfoot's noisy younger cousin. Either way, be careful when driving late at night.
Next up at number 3, the Grey Man of Ben Macdui. Ben Macdui in Gaelic, Mountain of the Son of Duff, is an awe-inspiring peak of the Scottish Highlands, staking the claim as one of Britain's highest mountains and the highest of the Cairngorms National Park. It's been scaled by countless people throughout history, but there are those that claim that there's something more sinister living out on the mountain. The Grey Man of Ben Macdui, and it doesn't like visitors. The creature is said to be at least 20 feet tall, and one eyewitness of the creature's presence, a respected professor and mountain climber named Norman Colley, said that he was first aware of something following him during his ascent after hearing strange footsteps behind him. Alone, isolated on the mountain, something was following him. And it wasn't human. The footsteps were laborious and delayed, as if that whatever was following him was much, much taller than he was. When he saw it, he described the Grey Man as vaguely human-shaped, brown in hue and fur, and shrouded in a strange grey mist. In 1945, a similar thing happened to a renowned mountain climber named Peter Densham, who described the exact same encounter with the exact same creature. Again, in 1958, the Scots magazine wrote of a similar account from naturalist Alexander Tunion, who this time found himself armed with a rifle and fired several rounds into the Grey Man. He thought he'd hit it, whatever it was, but after trekking over through the snow, found no sign of the creature. It vanished away like fog rolling across a mountain, and the mystery of the Grey Man of Ben Macdui remains unsolved. Swinging in at number 2, the Cabbagetown Tunnel Monster, which is an urban legend from my current stomping grounds of Toronto, Ontario, that is grounded in such bizarre circumstances that it remains a warning not to go wandering through the dark tunnels of downtown Toronto. I'm talking about the path. Ever. Don't go there. In 1978, in the eastern Cabbagetown district of Toronto, a 51-year-old man known as Ernest had a terrifying encounter in the network of tunnels that sprawl beneath the city. He had been out searching the neighborhood for a missing kitten that him and his wife had been raising when he stumbled across a tunnel entrance and decided to explore. After venturing 10 feet into the gloom, Ernest suddenly came across a creature that looked somewhat like a long, thin monkey, around 3 feet in height, with large teeth and covered in grey fur. It had unsettling eyes, he described, that peered out of the darkness in a bright orange hue. Even more unsettling, Ernest claimed that the creature spoke to him. "Go away, go away," it said in a hissing voice before slinking down a tunnel off onto the side. Ernest was reluctant to come forward with his story. He was a respected member of the community and he feared that he'd be ridiculed by his peers, but after being convinced by a friend, he spoke to the Toronto Sun, and a group of journalists and investigators followed him into the same tunnel. Although they didn't see the creature, they did see that the narrow tunnel led to a strange, gloomy chasm that dropped into the unseen sewer system below. And even stranger, they found the maimed, half-eaten carcass of a cat buried loosely beneath the dirt and debris. It permeated the legend of the Cabbagetown tunnel monster, and whatever it was, we may never know for sure. Just stay away. And finally, our number one spot, the Jersey Devil. Of course, it has to be perhaps one of the most notorious cryptids of all time, the famed Devil of Jersey, whose origin dates all the way back to when New Jersey was still a British colony. Hundreds upon hundreds of tales have been spawned from the legend of the Jersey Devil, dating from the early 1700s right up to recent times. As the legend goes, Mrs. Jane Leeds came from a poor family who carved out an existence in the bleak pine barrens of Jersey, a rugged place with dense forests, sandy soil and deep swamps. In 1735, Mrs. Leeds discovered that she was pregnant with her 13th child, which is, as they say, unlucky for some. Now, Mrs. Leeds wasn't too keen on giving birth, to say the least, and she claimed to friends and relatives that the devil can take the next one. And that's exactly what he did. When the baby was born, it was monstrous, with a scaly reptilian body, a horse's head, bat's wings and a long forked tail. He spread his wings, shot up out of the chimney and soared out across the pine barrens. The legend of the Jersey Devil was born. Now, whatever you think of this cryptid, truth or urban legend, it's the frequency that the Jersey Devil appears in contemporary folklore that is important. Hundreds of people have reported sightings of a strange bat-like creature with wings and a forked tail, flapping its wings across the pine barrens and cackling into the night. In 1816, Joseph Bonaparte, the brother of Napoleon, reported seeing the creature while hunting game in the woods. In 1840, a respected minister pointed his congregation towards a ghastly creature flapping above his church, and in 1909, literally thousands of people saw the same creature on the same day at the same time at multiple locations. In fact, it got so bad that schools had to close down and people just flat out refused to go outside. And still, to this day, New Jersey natives will warn you to tread carefully in the pine barrens. Kicking off at number 5, the Silver Woman. And this story comes from a police motorway patrol woman from Portsmouth, England, who explains that her career regularly confronts her with situations that are both bizarre and unnerving. But this one kind of takes the cake. On the 25th of November around 6:30 PM, during a routine speed camera set up in the Portsmouth city centre, her speed trap began picking up random tracings of non-existent objects in pitch black darkness, hurtling past her vehicle at around 30 to 40 miles per hour. Now, I know what you might be thinking, the device was obviously malfunctioning, but that wasn't the case, and our police officer had already thought of that. She trained the camera manually back onto the road surface to see what had been picked up, and she was shocked to discover that on the screen was what could only be described as humanoid figures running up and down the street at about 40 feet ahead of the vehicle. Strangely enough, they seemed to have a silver appearance to them, almost shimmering and translucent. She looked out of the window and again, nothing was there, but when she looked back at the screen, about 10 feet away from the vehicle was one of the same silvery entities standing motionless, facing away from the van, hulking and breathing in a strange fashion, as if they were weighing up taking on the police officer. What were they? Well, we'll never know, and when she played the tape back for her fellow officers, the silvery entities were nowhere to be seen. Yeah, I've got no clue about this one. Coming in at number 4, the Folk Monster. Now, Bigfoot is obviously the heavy hitter of the cryptid world. People have devoted their entire lives to hunting down the elusive mountain creature, stretching all the way across the wildlands of North America, as well as similar instances across the planet. But there is one little town in America that seems to be the hotspot for these sightings: Folk, Arkansas, and in 1971 it became the scene of its most terrifying legend. Meet Bobby Ford, a man who vehemently claims he's seen Bigfoot, or a version of it, describing it as 7 feet tall, ridiculously fast, and covered in long brown hair. And he saw it up close and personal. It was a Saturday when Bobby and his brother were out hunting a short distance from their rural home when they heard screams in the distance. Bobby's wife, Elizabeth Ford, was frozen in horror when a creature reached through the front window, massive and hairy with glowing red eyes that made no sound except for heavy breathing. When Bobby and his brother ran back to the home, the creature turned and grabbed him as he sprinted up to the porch. It tackled him to the ground with ease and then disappeared into the woodland. The creature had left behind clear tracks in the house and nearby area, 3-toed footprints that matched the deep 3-fingered scratches that were made in the wood of the front porch. Bobby Ford was rushed to hospital and treated for minor wounds and shock, and the family were so terrified by the encounter that they moved out. They'd only lived there a week. That's terrible timing.
Moving on to number 3, we have the demon cat. Now this is a cryptid that apparently stalks Washington DC. It all started back in the 1800s. According to a report in the newspaper, this weird cat appeared and scared a group of security guards. They all fired at the cat, but before the bullet could even hit the cat, it disappeared right in front of their eyes. Then in January of 1898, a watchman was patrolling around when he saw this demon cat come right towards him. The closer it got to him, the bigger it got. Some say it got as big as a tiger. Others say it got to the size of an elephant. The massive beast then snarled and let out a massive hiss. It leaped towards the watchman, but it disappeared right in front of his eyes before it attacked him. That same year, the cat made many more appearances. In fact, it's believed that the cat shows itself right before disaster strikes. It appeared before Lincoln was shot, before the stock market crashed in 1929, and right before JFK was killed. So before the next devastating thing happens, this beast might make a return. Moving on to number 2, we have the Mongolian deathworm. The Mongolian deathworm is a famous cryptid in China. It's said to lurk in the Gobi Desert and is described as being this giant red-type worm creature. In fact, its Japanese name literally translates to large intestine worm. To make matters worse, apparently it can spit poison at its victims from afar. It's believed that this acid-like venom is so strong that it can kill a camel or horse. Over the years, there have been a number of terrifying encounters with this massive worm. One story that gets shared around a lot involves a young boy who gets followed home by this worm. The next day, his dead body was found by his home. It's believed that he ended up touching the worm and died doing so. His family knew that the worm was behind his death, so they headed out on a trail in the sand looking for it to get revenge. But the family never returned home. Now that's more of a legend. Let's talk about a supposed real encounter with this slithery dude. The first apparent real sighting was during the 19th century. Someone was out in the desert when they saw this creature slithering around. They said it looked like a cow's intestine. He watched this creature for quite some time and actually saw it strike and kill another creature. A more recent sighting took place in 2013. People were out looking for it and actually found it, and apparently even caught this creature on camera. But who even knows what happened to this footage? Because I want to see it for myself. I swear, I need my own myth busting show or something. And in our number 1 spot today, we got Spring-Heeled Jack. Dude, the legend of Spring-Heeled Jack is a pretty freaking creepy one. What makes it even creepier is the fact that a number of people encountered this weird half-man, half-beast creature. That's multiple witnesses, and they all had similar encounters, which makes me believe that this cryptid might be real. So back in Victorian England, people were worried about this weird man-type creature named Spring-Heeled Jack. According to a number of stories, Jack would visit homes in the middle of the night, ring the doorbell, and when someone would answer it, he would attack them. Now, he was given the name Spring-Heeled Jack as witnesses said he had the ability to jump great distances and heights, something no normal human can do. Victims say he looked like a man dressed in red shoes and armor. Others claim he would wear loose-fitting black clothes with a helmet, or that he had wings and horns and sharp fangs that formed a wicked smile. The first sighting of Spring-Heeled Jack was October of 1837. A woman named Mary Stevens was walking in her town when this creature jumped from a tall building down to the ground right in front of her. He then attacked her and tried to kiss her, but someone heard her screams and thankfully came to the rescue. They then both saw this creature leap away. And Mary wasn't the only victim terrorized by Jack. A girl named Lucy Scales was also attacked by it. Same with a woman named Jane Alsop. She was attacked and strangled by this creature, but she managed to free herself. Jane said this about Jack, and I quote, "He was wearing a kind of helmet and a tight-fitting white costume like an oilskin, and he vomited blue and white flames." Soon, more and more people were going to the police terrified by Spring-Heeled Jack. One person said they saw Jack jumping from rooftop to rooftop. They said he had glowing red eyes and big sharp claws. Due to the fact that so many people encountered Jack, I'm telling you, it might be real. Was he a human? Was he a cryptid? Was he a weird human creature thing? I don't even know, man. Starting off this countdown, we have the Beast of Gévaudan. Between 1764 to 1767, people in Gévaudan, France were fearing for their lives. A terrifying beast was stalking the town and taking the lives of many of the residents. This beast was described as a large wolf or something like a large calf or horse. Calf as in cow, not. Imagine like a large like someone's leg. Sorry. It was covered in reddish gray fur and had a long tail like a panther. It also apparently had a black stripe on its back and talons on its feet. The first victims were a bunch of hunters. The remains of 16 hunters were found in the forest, their heads all decapitated, their limbs scattered about. It is said that in the end 100 individuals died at the hands of this beast. To make matters worse, it also had the tendency to rip out its victims' throats. One terrifying encounter happened to a girl named Jean Boulet on June 30th in 1764. She was tending to a flock of sheep when this creature attacked and killed her. That's not all though. Another woman was attending to her cattle when the beast attacked her as well. Thankfully, she was able to escape it. She described it as, I quote, "like a wolf, yet not like a wolf." The last time it ever threatened the town was on October 8th, 1764. A group of hunters set out to capture and kill this beast. The beast had previously mauled a number of people on that day. Later on, the hunters found it and shot at it. They didn't kill it, but they did drive the beast out of their town. Did he flee to another town? Did he go into hiding? Who knows? In our fourth spot today, we have the El Chupacabra. El Chupacabra is a very creepy creature with vampire-type tendencies. They like to attack animals and then drain them completely of their blood. When they're done, they just leave the animal's carcass and run off, which is quite strange. Normal animals like to feast on the meat, but this creature is only interested in the blood. So this creature has been described in a variety of ways. Some say it's like a weird reptilian kangaroo, whereas others say it looks like a hairless canine with red glowing eyes. Nonetheless, it's creepy. So the first reported sighting of a chupacabra dates back to 1887 in Wexford County. Two lumberjacks were in the forest when they saw a weird creature dart by them. They described the creature as having a man's body, but a dog's head. It didn't stop there though. In 1938, a man named Robert Fortney reported a terrifying encounter with this beast as well. He said that there were 5 of them that surrounded him and then attacked him. He said that one of the 5 walked on 2 legs. Another creepy encounter took place in 1961. A night watchman in Michigan was patrolling the grounds of a manufacturing plant when he saw something weird in the distance. At first, he thought it was a person. That was until he got closer and realized that this person had dog-like features. He took out his gun and shot at the beast, but it did nothing. The last sighting that I want to talk about is one that gives me the heebie-jeebies. This story takes place in 1995 in Puerto Rico. A number of farmers would wake up and find their goats, sheep, and cows dead with a weird bite mark on their neck. Their animals were completely drained of blood. So does this mean that the chupacabra is real? If not, what was sucking the blood out of those farm animals? In our third spot, we have the Shuck. The Shuck is a ghostly black dog from East England legends. Don't be fooled though, this dog is anything but cute, cuddly, and friendly. It's got a thirst for blood. Those who have seen it describes it as a big black hound. Some even say it has red or green glowing eyes. Now this ghost dog is said to terrorize rural towns and villages across the country. The most famous as well as most horrifying encounter would be from 1577. One night a bunch of villagers had to seek shelter in a church during a huge thunderstorm. As they were huddled in there, a big black dog burst through the church door and attacked a man and his son. It also knocked down one of the church's pillars, so a part of it actually collapsed. It then ran out of the church, and as it did, it apparently left scorch marks on the wood of the church floor and door. Those marks are apparently still there today. People were horrified by this encounter, and that's how the legend of the Shuck came to life. In our second spot, we have the Green Beach Monster. This is apparently a very strong and scaly, slimy beast that hunts for prey in Ohio rivers. The first encounter happened to a woman named Miss Johnson and her friend. It was August 21st of 1955, and the two ladies were enjoying a swim in a river. One of the ladies was in an inflatable tube, just, relaxing, while Mrs. Johnson swam by. That's when all of a sudden she was dragged underwater. She struggled to free herself, and thankfully she managed to. She resurfaced only to be dragged under again. Thankfully, Miss Johnson managed to free herself once again. She did so by kicking this thing. According to Miss Johnson, the hand that grabbed her was large and hairy and had sharp nails or claws. She also knew that this beast was large and strong just based on the way it grabbed her and pulled her down and held her down. In fact, Miss Johnson was left with multiple bruises and wounds on her leg from this creature. Without this, people probably would have thought that she was just lying. But she had a full-on claw print bruise on her leg. Obviously, the two reported the encounter to the police, and that's when they got a visit from an Air Force colonel. He interviewed them both and took very detailed notes. Before he left, he warned the two women to never mention this encounter ever again. And I mean, that sounds hella suspicious. As if the government had captured this cryptid and then it escaped and they didn't want people to know. So anyway, they should get one of those memory erasers from Men in Black. You know what I'm talking about, the little ksh. And in a number one spot today, we have the Jersey Devil. The Jersey Devil is a very famous cryptid said to live in the Pine Barrens region of New Jersey. Legend goes that in 1735, a mother gave birth to a child that she did not want. Her and her husband couldn't afford to raise another child. Apparently, she had 12 children already, and after she found out she was pregnant again, she cursed the child and said it was a devil child. In fact, one version of the story, apparently she offered her unborn son to the devil. Anyways, she ended up giving birth to the child and all was well and normal. But as days went by, the kid started to transition into this weird creature. It grew hooves, it had a goat's head and bat wings and a forked tail. It would growl and scream. In another version, the mother was actually apparently a witch and the child's father was the devil himself. And that was the creature that they gave birth to. Either way, it's creepy as hell. So there have been reported sightings of this creature as early as the 1820s. Some say it has a horse's head, long claws, and bat-like wings, whereas others say it looks like a kangaroo with wings. In 1909, that's when this creature terrorized New Jersey. Tons of people were apparently seeing this creature. In fact, due to all the sightings, workers were advised to stay home and schools were closed. Just saying that if they thought that this creature was fake, none of that would have happened, so they were scared for a reason. Eventually, the hype around the Jersey Devil died down. That was until 1927. A taxi driver in Salem City was minding his own business when apparently he encountered this beast. The beast was then following the man and was pounding on the roof of his taxi. Hey, I don't know, maybe he just needed a lift. Then in the 1960s, residents were woken up in the middle of the night to strange screaming. They all knew that this was the cries from the Jersey Devil. And in 1980, the Jersey Devil struck again. Officers and forest rangers were called onto a scene at a farm where a bunch of pigs had been killed. Their bodies were all scratched and ripped open, the back of their heads were eaten, but there was no blood on the ground. There's no explanation for what could have done this to the pigs, besides the legendary Jersey Devil.
Number 5. The Loveland Frog. First up on our list is the Loveland Frog, a cryptid that was new to me but is very quickly winning my heart, and maybe he'll steal yours as well. The Loveland Frogman is a mythic humanoid frog that is a legend to the people of Loveland, Ohio, which is where the name comes from. The Frogman is described as a 4-foot bipedal frog, mostly appearing to hide around bodies of water. I mean, it's a frog. Where else is it gonna go? It was first sighted in 1955 by a businessman driving home alone at night. He was headed out towards Branch Hill in Ohio when he saw 3 strange, short, squat, bizarre-looking creatures standing on their hind legs alongside the road. He described them all as being 3 to 4 feet tall with leathery-looking skin and faces just like a frog with giant glowing yellow eyes. The Frogman would go quiet for a bit and wouldn't be seen again until 1972 when a local police officer was driving home and saw an unidentified 4-foot creature running in front of his car's headlights. When he got a good look at it, the officer described it as a leather-skinned bipedal animal crouching like a frog, and it hurriedly ran towards a river. 2 weeks after that sighting, another Loveland police officer reported seeing the same creature, the same little bipedal frog monster. This officer, however, shot at the Frogman and discovered that what he found was a tailless iguana that had grown unusually large. Now, while for some, that was the end of the Frogman legend, there are still sightings and reports to this day. As recent as 2016, people are still claiming that they see the Loveland Frogman. To the people of Loveland, the Frogman is something of a local hero. They love the guy, and I gotta be honest, I sincerely do too. There's something about this cryptid story that's really doing it for me. There's no stories about him eating anybody, the Loveland Frog Monster is not attacking anybody, he's just a happy little frog guy scurrying across the roads. I sincerely hope they're out there. And hey, you having fun on the channel? Drop a subscribe for new scary videos every single day, twice a day. Let's keep on going. Number 4. The Fresno Nightcrawlers. Up next is the Fresno Nightcrawlers, and let me just say right now, these are probably my favorite cryptid on the entire list. If I say another one is, I'm lying, it's these guys. Some cryptids are downright terrifying. Some cryptids will keep you up all night, and maybe these guys will too, but I personally find them downright adorable. These are the Fresno Nightcrawlers, bizarre, rail-thin bipedal creatures with no discernible features whatsoever. The only footage we have of them is blurry security camera footage, which doesn't help identify the creatures much at all. They appear short with very, very long legs, almost stilt-like. The first reported sighting of one of the Nightcrawlers came from a city in California, Fresno, where the name comes from. A man named Jose was at home late at night with his dog trying to get a good night's sleep, but was repeatedly disturbed by his dog barking at something out the window. He went over to quiet his dogs down and noticed something deeply bizarre on his security camera. He saw a pair of white, elongated creatures strolling down his lawn. The next morning he claims to have seen small footprints all over the lawn. The next sighting of the Nightwalkers was in Carmel, also in California. A former Marine and his wife were driving up a hill, and they claimed that they saw a 7-foot tall creature that they described as a thin, pale, armless white humanoid walking on by. What are the Nightwalkers? They're weirding me out. Are they aliens? Cryptid? Possessed pair of pants? If anyone's got a line, you let us know immediately. Whatever the Nightwalkers are, all I know is that I love them. I think they are downright adorable. I watched the clip of them walking down the hill like 30 times while I was writing this script, so just know that.
Swinging in at number 3, the Kinderhook Blob, which is just a great name, really, isn't it? And if I'm being honest, the legend of the Kinderhook Blob is exactly what cryptid tales are made of, so strap in. It's sometime in 1962 New York, and on 6 separate occasions, multiple witnesses encountered a floating, mysterious blob-like creature that was so terrifying in its form that 2 men armed with shotguns fled in terror. The initial encounter was from a 10-year-old boy named Hallenbeck and his 7-year-old cousin Chari. They were playing in the dense woods nearby the house when all of a sudden they both heard this really high-pitched whistle noise, and suddenly, from behind a nearby pine tree, they witnessed a white amorphous object appear in full view, which slowly began writhing toward them. On 5 more occasions, which insanely would happen over the next 12 years, all the way until 1978, dozens of eyewitnesses would explain in vivid detail similar accounts of an amorphous white blob-like creature that would emerge from the woods, often attaching its tendrils to trees whilst incessantly making its way towards its victims, causing them to flee in terror. So much so that on one occasion 2 grown men tried blowing it to pieces with shotguns to no avail, and then turned tail and ran. What I love about this story is the essence of a cryptid tale. For all intents and purposes, the Kinderhook Blob could be a disused weather balloon floating listlessly through the air, but because it was seen multiple times by multiple people in the right setting, the legend of the terrifying white blob quickly became a horrifying reality. Either that, or it's a sentient alien lifeform that's going to consume us all, so yeah. Coming in next at number 2, the disappearance of Peter Grayson. The Groot Slang, or the Groot Slang, which in Afrikaans loosely translates to big snake, is a legendary creature widely considered to be one of the continent's most prolific cryptids, and is reputed to dwell exclusively in the deep caves and cavernous systems in the Richtersveld, South Africa. According to legend, the Groot Slang is a primordial creature that is reputedly as old as the world itself, and dwells within what locals refer to as the bottomless pit, which also, conveniently enough, is also filled with precious diamonds. Well, diamonds historically have a proficiency of attracting daring adventurers, and one of those adventurers just so happened to be an English businessman known as Peter Grayson. In 1917, Grayson and a team of excavators began an expedition into the Richtersveld cave system, accompanied by several local guides. After heading out into the rocky desert landscape, and upon hearing that Grayson intended to descend into the bottomless pit, unwittingly the lair of the Groot Slang, the local guides quickly left after warning Grayson that they'd lost friends and family to the violent serpent before, and they weren't going to do it again. He shrugged it off, and alongside his 2 excavators headed deep into the cave, and well, that's the last that they heard of any of them. The Grayson dynasty faded into obscurity after their patriarch was never seen alive again, but as the legend goes, one of the local guides returned to the cave a day or so later after feeling guilty for abandoning Grayson and his team. At the entrance of the cave, he found the body of an excavator, half of his body actually, to be specific. His legs and most of his torso had been ripped clean off, and he died attempting to crawl back out. What a way to go. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot, the legend of Yuri Grando. And I just have to tell this cryptid story because it's one of my favourites, and it's also considered to be one of the first historical instances of vampirism. As the legend goes, Yuri Grando Eljovic was a villager and poor peasant from the region of Istria, which now makes up modern day Croatia. Historically, he was referred to as a strigoi, strigon or strigun, a local word for something that resembles a vampire and a warlock. Sometime around 1656, Yuri died due to an unknown illness, but according to legend, he regularly returned from the grave at night as a vampire to terrorize his village until his decapitation in 1672. The legend tells that for 16 years after his death, Yuri would rise from his grave by night and terrorize the village. The village priest Giorgio, who had buried Yuri 16 years previously, discovered that at night somebody would knock on the doors around the village, and on whichever door he knocked, someone from that house would die within the next few days. Eventually, the villagers rallied after witnesses saw the corpse of Yuri roaming the streets, and led by the town's mayor, chased and tried to kill him with a hawthorn stick, but failed to pierce his supernatural flesh. The next night, 9 people went to the graveyard and dug up Yuri's coffin, finding a perfectly preserved corpse with a smile on its face. It was Yuri with pristine white flesh and no signs of decomposition. They tried to stake him once more, but witnesses noted that the stick would not penetrate its flesh. Eventually, the villagers were so terrified and kind of fed up with his vampire antics that a brave villager known as Stipan Milicic took a saw and decapitated the corpse. As soon as it tore Yuri's skin, the vampire screamed and blood began gushing from the cut. Allegedly, a man that was presumed dead for 16 years. Yeah, that one's pretty worrying, right? Kicking off at number 5, the Loveland Frogmen. Hailing from the misty swamps and vast wetlands of rural Ohio, the Loveland Frogmen, also affectionately known as the Loveland Lizards, are a cryptid unlike no other, and have reportedly appeared under several bizarre circumstances on a regular basis in Ohio's Clermont County. Allegedly, the first sightings of these eerie bipedal amphibians first occurred in 1955 and has proven to be one of the most intriguing cryptozoological mysteries in North America. The creatures themselves allegedly live in the temperate forests and wetlands of Clermont County and are able to survive the cold winters of the region without having to hibernate. Useful. During their first sighting at approximately 3:30 AM, a local businessman was driven down a lonely stretch of road, running alongside the Miami River on the outskirts of the small town known as Loveland, Ohio. Suddenly and out of nowhere, the man claimed to have witnessed 3 bipedal quasi-reptilian entities emerge from the dense reeds and begin to congregate by the side of the road. The man slowed down and turned out his lights as he pulled his car up to a curb to observe these creatures further. He claimed that they stood between 3 and 4 feet tall, were covered with leathery skin, and had webbed hands and feet. Their most most distinguishing feature though was their distinctly frog-like head, which the man claimed bore deep wrinkles where their hair should have been. Well, since then, over 5 more sightings of the Loveland Frogmen have occurred over a 60-year period. What do you guys think? What's going on, Ohio? Next up at number 4, the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. And I absolutely love this story either way, because if you've ever heard of the famed 50 Berkeley Square in London, England, then you'll know that, cryptid or not, this place is terrifying enough. It's proof as well that there are some cases out there which irk on the realm of the paranormal and become a category so unexplainable that they don't really fit into anything, or can fit into anything. I don't know, it's pretty nebulous. Either way though, the haunted legacy of Berkeley Square has featured ghosts and poltergeists the world over, and it's widely considered to be one of the most haunted places in England. But there is one particular instance that takes the cake, the nameless thing of Berkeley Square. A tale that takes place in 1840 when a 20-year-old Sir Robert Walboys got into a drunken dare in which he had written off Berkeley Square and its paranormal reputation as a whole load of Kaiser Soze. He put money down that he could spend the night in the building's most cursed and haunted second floor, and so the next evening did exactly that, with a pistol in his hand. For robbers, I guess, and a makeshift pulley line attached to a bell in case he saw anything out of the ordinary. He drank a whole load of courage and tried to get some shut-eye, but well, of course, young Bobby Warboy's story cuts out there, when the landlord was awoken by the bell rig ringing incessantly and ran upstairs to check on him. He found Robert Warboys dead as a doornail, slouched in the corner with his eyes bulging in terror. Legend has it that the landlord witnessed an amorphous, shadowy form with slime oozing from it, claws and tentacles and all dripping from its form, suddenly slink back into the shadows of the corner of the room and disappear. And since then, tales of the nameless thing of Berkeley Square are more common than any of us would actually like.
Number 3. Skinwalkers. Now let's shift to one that's not adorable even a little bit. Skinwalkers are an extremely popular cryptid, a person with the ability to shapeshift into any creature they desire. Sometimes the legends state that in order to shapeshift they need to molt out of their skin, and in some legends they have to wear the pelt of the animal they intend to shapeshift into. You know, sometimes skinwalkers are presented as monstrous, sometimes humanoid. The recurring lines through every skinwalker stories though is that they are absolutely terrifying, and under no circumstances should you ever look one in the eyes, as it's said that looking one in the eyes will not only draw its attention but seal your fate. So take a listen to this story from Reddit. This post came to us from a Reddit thread asking, what was the scariest thing that has ever happened to you? And an anonymous Redditor shared this story, and it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever read. Beginning. I was a kid when this happened. My uncle and I were finishing up gathering firewood from my grandmother because it was getting dark. We were driving back on a dirt road, and I had this awful sense of being watched. Before I could turn to look out my window, my uncle shouted, "Don't." My heart felt like it was gonna beat out of my chest, and I heard a tap on the window. My uncle sped up and started praying in our native language. I didn't know what was going on, and I thought it was over until our truck dipped from the bed. My uncle then started saying, "Look at me and don't turn away," over and over. And then I heard it again, tapping from the window behind me. It was getting harder for me to breathe, and I wanted to cry. A minute or two passed, and the truck dipped. My uncle looked at me and said, "We'll ask your father to do a prayer in the morning so that the evil will forget our faces." Naturally, other people on Reddit were kind of terrified about that story since it's sending a chill down my spine, and they asked him what he thought it was, and the Redditor said simply that he thought it was possibly a skinwalker. What more is there to say? Number 2. The Flatwood Monster. The Flatwood Monster is another West Virginia native, and I've gotta ask, why are there so many cryptid stories coming out of West Virginia? I've never been there, so maybe somebody can clear this up, because all I know about West Virginia is anything John Denver sang about, and he didn't mention Moth Man or the Flatwood Monster, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, the Flatwood Monster is a cryptid that's been thought to be an extraterrestrial in nature. It was reported to be 10 feet tall and roughly 4 feet wide. It's described as wearing some sort of mechanical suit like it's Darth Vader rather than a purely organical being, and its most notable feature is its giant bulbous head with 2 gigantic eyes glowing green. It's got a big cowl in the shape of a spade behind it that makes it look a bit like it's an alien vampire, and its body was thick, armored, and it has small, spindly little arms like a T-Rex. Now, the Flatwood Monster's first sighting dates all the way back to 1952, when 3 local boys saw a shining light falling across the sky, eventually hitting the ground nearby at a local farm. The boys returned home to report that they'd seen a UFO crash land and told one of their moms to get a search party going, and honestly, that is exactly what I would do if I ever saw an alien. I would probably still call my mom, to be honest, if I ever saw an alien. From there, they gathered a small search party to go to the farm to approach what they saw. saw. When they reached the top of the hill, they saw a large pulsating ball of fire and smelled a mist that was making their eyes burn. Someone in the search party noticed two small lights and flashed his light quickly at them, revealing a creature standing 10 feet tall with glowing green eyes. The creature hissed at them, then glid upwards and head off into the night. What was the Flatwood Monster? Some skeptics have speculated that those eyes could have been that of a barn owl, and the face does kind of light up. The shadow was disguising it, so it would make sense. But that begs to ask, what was the mist? And what was the thing that fell from the sky? Was the Flatwood Monster an alien? And is it just me, or is the Flatwood Monster just the tiniest bit adorable as well? I know it's kind of terrifying, and its bug eyes are gonna haunt my dreams, but does anyone else think it looks a little huggable? Shaped like a friend? Number 1. Moth Man. Moth Man is arguably one of the most famous cryptids of all time, and it's captured our heart since he started flapping around in popularity. Mothman's first ever recorded sighting was in 1966 in West Virginia, when 5 men were in a cemetery prepping for a funeral when they saw something bizarre rustling around in the trees nearby, and lifting off was a massive brown-winged creature that disappeared into the night, far too large and unwieldy to be a bird. From there, the legend of the Mothman began to rise. It would get spotted frequently throughout West Virginia and the surrounding states, but its home is West Virginia. 3 days later, after the first sighting of the Mothman, on November 5th, 1966, another sighting occurred. Roger and Linda Scarberry were driving with their friends, another couple, Steve and Mary Millette, around midnight. While driving, the couples noticed that amidst the darkness there were glowing eyes that seemed to be hovering around them. They stalled the car a bit, unnerved about who these mysterious eyes could have belonged to, and through the darkness and the headlights of the car, they saw a creature that stood 7 feet tall with leathery wings folded against its back. The creature began to pursue them rapidly, matching the speed of the car at around 100 miles an hour. They tried to turn around to get a better look at the thing, but the creature screeched and flew upwards into the sky when it was hit by its headlights. Now this would be far from the last sighting of the Mothman. Since these early sightings, Mothman has been reported hundreds of times across West Virginia. He's practically a pillar of the community. I think he's allowed to vote. Some say he's a benevolent figure who wants to help people and warn them of dangers around, whereas others say that he's a more mysterious, nefarious agent, flying around sending people to their doom. There's an allegation that Mothman was involved in the destruction of a bridge in 1967 that led to the death of 40 people. Some survivors claim that they saw the Mothman flying around overhead after the collapse. Whether he's real, a West Virginian legend, a friend or a foe, there's no denying that like a moth to a flame, we're drawn to the story of the Mothman.